Welcome, everybody. My name is Ronnie. I'm the Executive Director of Western Native Voice, and we're here to have a community conversation with Carol and Denise Juneau to focus on civic engagement and the importance of primary elections, which is just right around the corner as everyone's preparing. The session aims to inspire participation and increase understanding of the voting process, starting with primary and encouraging meaningful community involvement, especially with tribal and Native communities. So thank you, Denise and Carol, for being here. And we will get started with your introductions if you both want to introduce yourselves.
Sure, I'll start. I will just say that's Ronnie Jo Horse who just spoke. She's the awesome executive director of Western Native Voice and has Western Native Voice is sponsoring this. So I'm just going to pass it
Yeah,
over
good.
to.
And thanks to Western Native
Oh,
Voice.
just one thing. This one turned 81 yesterday, and we had a great party. So it's a happy birthday. Now she's 81 plus 1 day. So.
I'm 81 and I'm still voting. I'm Carol Juneau, and it's good. And thanks, Ronnie, for Western Native Voice, continuing in your work to get people registered and get people out to vote and using their power of the vote. I'm a Hidatsa Mandan, originally from Fort Berthold Reservation in North Dakota, but I've been in Montana for so long, I guess, feels like home. So it's good to see everybody, and let's have a good session about encouraging people to register, encouraging people to vote. The same old work I think we've been doing for many years and still needs to be done.
We forgot to talk about all your past
stuff. Oh, I've served in the state legislature for 12 years as a representative, and then in the Senate, and which was really enjoyable. But it was some time ago, and have been a lifelong Democrat, and been to lots of Democratic activities, and I'm basically probably an educator. I guess I would call myself that. Is what I believe in is the power of education and the power it can bring to families, power it can bring to individuals and to our communities. And also the same, as the power of the vote, what it can do the same thing. So it's good to be here.
I'm Denise Juneau, the daughter of Carol Juneau and Stan Juneau, both educators in Browning, Montana on the Blackfeet Reservation. That's where my dad was from. So I'm Mandan Hidatsa, grew up on the Blackfeet Reservation, descendant of the Blackfeet. Also an educator. I taught high school English and Blackfeet studies and a few other things, and went on to work at the Office of Public Instruction at the state of Montana doing Native education primarily. And eventually ran for the top spot. So I ran for state superintendent of public instruction in 04? No, yeah, 04. And then got elected for 2 terms, and we did some really great things. It was really a fun job, and promoted Indian Ed for All, promoted Graduation Matters. And I feel really proud of the work that we were able to accomplish. I see a lot of OPIers on here, and we did really some awesome work and really moved public education forward in the state. And then from there, I ran a race for Congress when it was an at-large seat, and we'll kind of get into that later because it'll, kind of have conversations about primaries. And was unsuccessful in that, but that brought me over to apply for and be selected for the superintendent of Seattle Public Schools. And I see a Seattle Public School worker on here too. So Keisha and I and people who were on the cabinet there, we did some great work in Seattle as well, stuff that we can all be proud of. And then now, back in Montana, love this state, always meant to come back, living in Missoula, doing some consulting, and, always on the fringe and being a political nerd in all the spaces. So just happy to be here. So you got asked a question about speaking to some of the legislation you passed. You.
Oh, for me. Okay. Some of the pieces of legislation that I'm proud to have helped get through the legislature was changing the derogatory word squaw off of our state land sites, mountains, valleys, rivers, and that was in 1999. And Montana had 76 sites that needed names changed, and we all know that that word is a derogatory word for Indian women. And so that was one. And I'm so proud that Deb Haaland, when she was the Secretary of Interior in recent years, she did a national effort and signed a proclamation that that word would come off of all federal land sites. And so it was a great thing that that happened as well. Another piece of legislation I think that's had a big impact in Montana was Indian education for all. And I was lucky to be a sponsor of that and got the bill passed in 1999. And with a lot of support from, I guess, legislation gets through with people that are from, our tribal communities, our colleagues in the legislature, are people that work in various organizations such as Western Native Voice, but just people that have, stood up and stood behind me and supported that bill, and we were able to get that through. But one of the things that it took a long time to get money for that, and money does matter, and in all forms of politics. And so it wasn't until, I believe, 2006, there was a lawsuit filed by the school districts in Montana. And we joined, the Montana Indian Education Association joined that lawsuit as with a, what do they call it, amicus brief. And we were successful in the Supreme Court to that the state had failed its obligations, which are outlined in the Constitution in our state. So we were able to get funding, and not only for Indian education for all, but for at-risk students and for American Indian students in our public school systems in Montana. So that was a huge economic resource to begin providing education to all students. It's not just meant for Native students, but for all students to learn more about who they are and what their contributions have been and what their history is and what their arts are, what their, it impacts all of curriculum. So very good to have been part of those, and appreciate everybody's support in getting that done.
And what's kind of cool? I'll just tell one story. My mom moved over to Missoula. I'm really happy to have her over here, and we're able to do a lot of things together. But she lives in a place where she can go on her patio and look out and see this peak called Chappaqua, which was renamed as a result of her legislation. So it's a Salish name for Shining Peak, but she can go outside and see the results of the legislation that she helped pass. So that's pretty cool.
It's really nice. Yeah. It's a beautiful sight each morning or in the evenings when you can see the mountain shining. And it was one of the benefits. I said one of the things that I think bought me on the or sold me on my condo here.
Great stories. Thank you for sharing, Carol. It's amazing work. So getting into, how did you first become civically engaged, and what motivated you to take that first step? I feel like often it could be scary to take that first step. And then what does being civically engaged mean to you personally?
What's the last part?
What does civically engaged mean to you personally?
Oh, okay. Want me to start? Okay. I became involved in, I guess, an advocacy in politics, or just in creating change for Native people, probably when in the 60s. I mean, the 60s were really an era of change for our nation, and so many people, whether it was the African American community, the Native communities, other communities, were fighting for their rights and fighting for social justice. And the American Indian movement developed during that period of time and raised awareness. I think that's when, in 1969, when Alcatraz was taken over. So there was a much bigger awareness of American Indian and that their rights under the treaties and treaty obligations the United States had. I was a student in Eastern Montana College at that time, or around that era. And so I said, those were things that I guess created in me some, I wanted to be part of that. I wanted to help. And so that's some of the things that my husband and I, Stan and I, got involved in some of the work in Billings in raising more social justice issues for American Indians in our community. Then, in moving to Browning with my husband and children, I became involved in probably the local Democratic Central Party, and started with the first steps of, I kind of seen not too many Indian people were involved in our local politics. And so we started with the basic things of registering voters. But I said, what a thing. I said, if you think about it, it has been many years, but there was probably had never been any American Indians serving on the Central Committee. I mean, the county commissioners in Glacier County. Now it's the whole face of the county has changed. I said, American Indians serve, I think it's probably a majority or all of them are in the Glacier County Central Committee or Glacier County commissioners that set policy. And that's one of the things, our local political bodies, whether they be school boards, whether they be county commissioners or city governments, those are really important governmental entities for American Indians to be part of and to be sitting at the table and to be voting. That's where policy is made. That's where laws are made. And that's where money is dispersed. And we all need to be really a part of that. And then an opportunity presented itself in 98, I believe, to serve in the Montana legislature. And I took advantage of that and then and was successful. So I figured I needed to, I was retired at that time and was able to do that and wanted to have, some input and be a voice at the state level as much as possible. So that's where kind of those came, and it's been quite a while, but I've been pleased with some of the work that was done. It's just there were 5 of us when we started in the legislature, 4 or 5 of the American Indians, and so it was like we'd meet as a caucus in our coordinator Indian Affairs office. All we needed was 4 or 5 chairs and we could meet. Now they have, I said, it's amazing. It's just truly amazing how many American Indians serve in the Montana legislature and are having impact, on a daily basis there to create policy, to set budgets. It's wonderful, both reservation-based and off-reservation. So I'm just really, proud of that and that work.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, it's the same for me. Like I kind of watched my mom and dad. My dad served on the tribal council for a while, and my mom was, state legislator, and it just kind of watching the whole progress of that. And we used to go around with them when they were registering voters to community events when we were kids, and just sort of seeing involvement and then watching what happens when people go and get elected and go sit in those seats. And like she said, it's sort of like the things that you're able to do and the policy you're able to advance is just much stronger when, my mom used to say, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And and that's just totally true. Like, I think when American Indian people are at the table or in those seats of power, it just makes a difference. It changes the discourse. It changes how people talk about things. There's a lot of education that has to happen. And when you have people there who have the lived experience, they're able to impart that onto their colleagues who may not have an understanding of tribal issues. I think it was really the importance of even having just 5 in the legislature, being able to pass Indian Ed for All because there were Indians there. And so it's just like, it's those types of things when you see the power of people sitting at the table and the perspectives they bring and the kinds of things they can get done. But it's also even me, like seeing Native people sitting at the table, just made me realize like it was possible. And I think we see that a lot in all the spaces now. We have, across the country, we have Peggy Flanagan running for US Senate, Deb Haaland running for governor of New Mexico, um, Deb Mary Peltola up in Alaska. We have Sharice Davids who's in Kansas. Like we have Native people who are running all across this country for offices. And so when young Native people see that happening, they can imagine themselves in those places. And I think that just, it's important. And even, school boards, like I'm on the Missoula County Public School Board here. And that's important to me. People were asking with all the things going on in the country, what can I do? What can I do? And it's sort of like get involved locally, become a precinct committee person, sit on the central committee of the party of your choice, and just try to get involved in a way. And that's really where the change is going to happen. It's the only place change can happen until we kind of shift this country into a different direction. So to me, it's sort of like I watched people be involved all while I was growing up. I knew what being civically engaged meant. I saw the outcomes of being civically engaged when people registered to vote and then they voted and they got the people that they wanted to elect into seats. And then what can happen when those people are sitting in those seats of power. And so it just became very important about the influence that can be brought to bear when, we're all doing our part and electing people who will represent our interests into those seats. And it makes a difference. So I've watched that happen over and over and over again. And so that to me, being civically engaged, running for office, but it's as simple as getting your friends and family registered to vote. And, you can go online and you can see if your friends and family are registered to vote. You can't see how they voted, but you can see that they're registered to vote, and get them registered to vote, get them to turn out, get them to vote, because it does make a difference. We can just look at some of the school levies that were just on the ballot across the state, and some school board races were decided by 2 votes. Levies failed by less than a handful, and so of votes. And so when people say, my vote doesn't matter, and we can talk about electoral college and all the things that happen at a national level, but locally, super important. And your vote certainly matters in a lot of these races that are super close. And so when 5 people opt out, it makes a difference and it swings entire elections. And so registering to vote, voting, I mean, it is just so, so important to make sure that we have everybody who we know in our lives that are participating, and getting things done and changing the trajectory of where we currently are.
Yeah, I think we've come a long way. I mean, it's been a lot of hard work by a lot of people. There's a lot of people that have done, you look at Janine Pease and her lawsuit on the Windy Boy case, Gail Small from Northern Cheyenne, all of the people that have worked so hard many years ago, people that have taken cases to court in Fort Belknap. Dolores Plumage went to court because there was never an Indian elected to the Blaine County Commissioners, never in 80 some years. And they're right there at the Fort Belknap Reservation. And she won, and she's been serving as a county commissioner now for a number of years. And one of the things that I was so proud too, has been Native women that have really helped lead a lot of these issues and a lot of the legal cases and a lot of the fight for voting rights. And it was a fight. You had to go to court. You had to make sure in Glacier County, they gave us like 10 or 15 voter cards when we first went to pick up cards to register voters. Then we would have to bring those back to Glacier County, to the registrar's office, and then we could get some more. So I said it went from that to, now they're available online where we can go. So, but yeah, there's been a long history of a lot of people that have just worked very hard to make sure that we can vote, to make sure that we can run for office, to make sure that we're in those seats of power. and that we can, help set the policy, help change laws, help make things better for people.
Yeah, very fortunate to be in the position that I am with all the work that has been done.
Mhm.
Just like you mentioned in Education for All, Montana's the literally only state that has that. And I always tell people that whenever we're in meetings and things. But we have a chance to register to vote and vote in this coming year. We have a primary election coming up. For those of you who don't know, a primary election is held before the general election, which voters choose which candidate from a political party will advance to represent that party in the general. That's happening on June 2nd. And then in the general, the final election is where voters choose between the candidates of the different political parties to decide who will hold that public office, and that will happen November 3rd. Why do primaries matter?
Yeah, I guess I'll start with that because when I first ran in '08 for state superintendent, I had a four-way primary. And I actually think, um, primaries make better candidates because you have to, hone your policy, you have to become better speakers. And the four of us traveled to forums all across this state. And, you have to find ways to distinguish yourself or you have to win the voters over. And, like Ronnie Joe said, our primaries right now are set up by party. So you either have to choose a Democrat um, ballot or a Republican ballot and vote that ballot in the primary. And then in the general in November, everybody gets to vote for one side or the other. They're on the ballot together. So um, it's, I just think it makes better candidates. It lets the voters have a choice, rather than one person being on the ballot. You get to have a choice and you get to listen to them. And it makes people show up in communities. If you're just a lone person on a ballot, you're going to be a shoo-in. And so primaries allow candidates to get out into local communities, speak to communities, so that voters can make up their mind. And I think that's just really an important process of how we our democratic process, and why we should vote in primaries is somebody's going to win. And when you are showing up, listening to those candidates, um, you get to help choose and you get to help shape the process and shape the direction and shape the rhetoric and the discussion and the values that are going to be brought to bear. And so when you see in the primary somebody who aligns with your values, somebody who comes from places like you, somebody who is going to be the best representative, and of course, somebody who can win in the general election, you get to help guide that when you're a primary voter. We don't have a lot of people don't vote in the primary, and it's sort of I think Ronnie Joe had some stats on it, but I will give you another statistic. In the last midterm election, 6% of Montana voters, so 6% of all the voters, effectively elected 88% of the Montana House because of the way that we elect people either by Democrat or Republican. If it's a fierce Republican primary, most of our seats in the state are going to be, when they move to the general, they win because it's a heavily Republican majority. Some seats are heavily Democrat. And so a lot of the seats, 88% of them, were won in the primary. And that is really distinguishing. So 88% of the legislative seats were basically decided in the primary. And for how our electoral system is currently set up in this state, you can elect an extreme, you can elect a moderate. You get to decide, the voters of the primary get to decide who's going to be sitting in those seats because 88% of them are decided in the primary. And that's pretty big. Do you have anything to say about primaries?
That's fine.
Yeah, turnout is about across the state, like 37 to 40% in Montana, and we're hoping it increases every year. Um, why do you think it's and even lower in Indian country, but why do you think that is compared to the general election, specifically in Indian country?
I think it's people paying attention during the primary. It's the end of school time. People are kind of busy with their lives of heading into the summer. Um, they're low information races. So, like in a primary, people aren't raising money to be on TV or be in all the spaces that they need to be in. And so people don't know. And so even when you tune in and you go pick up your ballot, you can look at a ballot and say, I don't know any of these people. And so it really is, if you are voting in primaries, there's a lot of voter guides out there. There's just a lot of information that you can take a look at their websites. You can attend forums. I think the Democratic side of the Western District, the U.S. House candidates have had like 15 forums in communities all up and down the western side of the state. And so they've had a lot of chance to talk to voters. And so I think it's just sort of people are busy and they don't turn out, and it's just sort of something that has to become automatic. And we know that when people start voting and they vote for 2 or 3 times, they're going to be consistent voters. And so again, it's sort of like, if you are a primary voter, take some people with you, help them vote their ballot, help them find information. I mean, it really is a person to person sort of effort that we need to make to say, ask your family members if they voted, and find information about the candidates and the ballot issues and everything else that's going to be on the ballot. But I just come back to, like, the primary election, particularly for state legislative seats, are mostly decided in that first election. And so it's just really important to pay attention and vote for people who align with your values.
Great. Thank you guys. Yeah, it's definitely hard to get the word out in rural Montana. So the best way is word of mouth, checking with your family, like Denise said, and even checking with your friends, we know folks that just turned 18, making sure they know that they can register to vote, and vote, and letting them know those dates. Those are all great points. So we will take some questions from the audience, and people have been typing in some questions. The first one is, what is the danger of the SAVE Act for Native voters?
Well, I'm not sure, like, we'll see what happens with the SAVE Act. It hasn't been passing. And I don't know, Ronnie Joe, if you have more information, like with Keaton's work back in DC, but I think, there's a lot of stuff in there, like birth certificates. I think a big part of it will be IDs that get used, names that get used, birth certificates, and having to prove birthright or a U.S. citizen. And so there's a lot of issues in there for everybody that would be really, really problematic about getting to the polls and being able to vote. And I think it just doubles up primarily for people of color and for women and for Native Americans. I just think it's a act that will really hinder people from approaching the polls and being able to cast their vote once they arrive. And so it's just really problematic. I hope it doesn't go anywhere. It really hasn't yet, but there's, several other bills that keep coming up and raising their ugly head in Congress as well. They have a bill that the very far extreme start trying to pose or pass right now, called the MEGA Act, MEGA, Make Elections Great Again, which is even worse than the SAVE Act. And so there are some things, and I mean, what happened at the Supreme Court is horrible, basically gutting the Voting Rights Act. And so there's just a lot happening at the federal level, and we just have to keep vigilant on all those issues and all the bills that are trying to be passed, and what might happen at the polls, and be aware that we need to protect ourselves and go in numbers to the polls. And so I think that's another reason to pull your friends and family together and approach the polls and voting in large numbers. The only way to change those things is to change who's sitting in those seats. And so again, importance of primary voting, importance of general voting.
Yeah, your vote will matter whether it's the primary and the general, but America is really facing some really big issues right now. SAVE Act trying to restrict our voting rights, whether it be through the Supreme Court action, whether it be through legislation. There's a lot of dangerous things happening in our country right now, and restricting our right to vote is one of them. But there's other things as well. So it makes, I guess, the only power we have with some of that is voting, making sure we elect those candidates, and maybe are we asking those candidates those hard questions? Are you gonna, what are you gonna do about the Voting Rights Act that the Supreme Court just gutted? So much of our voting rights has come from that for Indian country. So many of the laws and the court cases depended upon that. And so does that mean they're going to go back and take away some of that we've already won? So I said there's a lot of danger, and a lot of our country's in danger, our democracy's in danger right now. So we do have to vote. We have to run for office. We have to make sure our people that represent us value our country, value our democracy. And for tribes and for Indian people, I do think that we need to, the danger of, will treaty rights, will our termination rear its head again? It's still sitting there. What about our water? What about our resources? I do think they will come for them if they're allowed to. So I said there's some big issues, and it makes me, it's driving me to vote. I'm going to make sure I vote, and I always have. But it's more important, I guess, whether it's primary or the general of this year, that we get everybody out to vote. That will help protect our rights, help protect, tribal communities. And I know one of the issues that Western Native Voice faces is how to reach the American Indian people that are in cities as well. We've got a large population of Native people in Montana cities, and how to get the message through to them and to get them out voting is difficult. So, but it's a big issue this time. I mean, our country is in a tough situation for many of us, and so we do need to register voters and get them out to vote. The same old hard work that's been done for many, many years.
Yeah, it's hard to I know everybody feels down and feels like it's, beat down a lot. And the only way out of it is voting. That's the only way we're going to get ourselves out of this into a better spot. And so I think it's imperative on all of us to make sure that we're grabbing everybody we can. And people cannot opt out this time.
Yeah, thank you. And then one question is, do we need drivers for people to get to the voting office? I think we all need to work together to get people to the voting office and get them registered to vote. There's a lot of stuff happening, not only nationally, but here in Montana, with the ending of election day voter registration at noon, and having an extra day on a Saturday. That's going to really confuse people. But any closing thoughts on what can we do as a community moving forward?
Yeah, I think the main thing is just, paying attention, voting for people who align with your values, getting people it's going door to door. It's finding people who will elect the right people to office so that we can get back and look at people and be inspired and see ourselves reflected in those people and know that they are a part of us, or they're our good allies, and that they're going to push the right policies, and question the candidates when they come to your door about issues that you care about, and see where they stand. And then get everybody to vote. It's just it's the only way out. And like I said, if people feel like they shouldn't, you need to convince them that they need to.
Mm-hmm. I think, yeah, the power of the vote is just, it's amazing. It's one of the things when I served in the legislature, there's a red button and a green button. And I said, to be able to sit in that seat and be able to vote, push a red for no, I don't like that bill, or green, yes, let's go with it. That is the power you give to our legislators, to whether it's to fund daycare, whether it's to support our teachers in our schools, whether it's to support Medicaid and to stop what's happening to it. You get those red and green buttons, and you need people there that you can trust, people that will vote the way you want them to vote, but you have to be registered to do that, and you have to get to the polls to vote. And that's the challenge. But and then those of us that do that all the time, we need to make sure we stand up, we speak out, and call people, I guess, or tell people, and or send money to some of the candidates that you support. It costs money to run for office, and so if you've got a few extra dollars to send to a candidate, might be helpful, that that's going to vote the way you want them to vote and push the red or green button. So I said, yeah, Western Native Voice has got a lot of work to do, and
Well, we'll be with you though.
yeah, and so it's but I said there are a lot of people in Montana working on things on that, and but think about not only Montana, but it's our country we're working to save at this point too.
Mhm.
Yeah, well, thank you too for joining us and everybody who has logged on and listened. Tonight's conversation is just a reminder that our voices matter, not just individually, but collectively. And when we participate, we shape the future of our communities, literally. In Montana, we're a very small population, so our vote really does matter. And thank you again for being here, for listening and being a part of this work. And we encourage you to stay engaged, stay informed, and most importantly, stay involved and get registered to vote.
Yes.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Everybody.
Thanks, Ronnie Jo.
Have a good evening.
Thanks, everybody. Good seeing
Yeah.
ya.